Alright guys, welcome back to F1 Drama. The Bahrain Grand Prix is over. Is the season already over as well? Ferrari, another disaster class today, overshadowed though by a phenomenal performance from Fernando Alonso, but the Red Bulls, ominous, imperious. What words can you use to describe them? Leclerc's car blows up again. Ferrari explained exactly what happens and even implied they might have lost the engine, which certainly isn't a good sign going into the rest of the season after it's just race one. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Starting off here, of course, well, these are the view from the opening lap. But the first two laps, the cars looked rather close. And then after that, it was a very different story. First of all, even before the race began, Ferrari suggested they didn't really think they could win in Bahrain, right? Vasseur was saying, okay, the championship's not won in Bahrain. Apparently, the use of those soft tyres on Leclerc was to try and defend from Alonso, more so to attack the Red Bulls. Gave him an advantage, of course, off the line. But Ferrari knew that they weren't anywhere near Red Bull in terms of race pace. The entire grid, of course, was nowhere near Verstappen and Perez in terms of race pace. And to add insult to injury to Ferrari, they had to change both the energy store and the control electronics on Leclerc's car. This was, I believe, they turned up to the grid and the battery was slightly confusingly, had too much energy in it than they thought it should have. So they changed out what is effectively the battery and the control electronics associated with that. You're only allowed 2 of these the entire season. So if there's actually a fault with them, then they're really in trouble. But I guess they think, just as a precautionary measure, they wanted to change both the battery and the energy control system just to ensure that it was all okay. But obviously already a terrible sign, right? Before the race has even began, before you've even raced a single lap of the season, having to go on to your second of 2 allowed. Probably won't be a big deal for Ferrari, but I say that knowing that Ferrari are Ferrari and, we know what they tend to do in situations like this. So wasn't good for them at all. Even Hamilton admitted before the race that the Red Bulls will be long gone, so from that side might not be exciting, but hopefully we can race Fernando and the Ferraris, which they kind of did at times, the Mercedes. But, well, let's dive into the race. First lap was funny, actually. Hamilton got a blistering start, as did Leclerc on Perez, getting up into P2. Hamilton got past both Alonso off the start and his teammate George Russell, and then Stroll almost took out Alonso. I actually thought he got a puncher from this. I don't know how he did it, to be honest. Basically, Alonso went for the switchback on Hamilton into turn 4. Stroll comes barreling down the inside and almost takes his teammate out. And, then here comes the strategy calls from Ferrari going plan A, which basically meant 2-stop. Bit confused, to be honest, why no other teams thought they could do the soft, hard strategy that the Red Bulls did. Every team kind of went soft, hard, hard. That was pretty much what the teams elected to do, which, was confusing when the Red Bulls could make the soft hard work easily and with no issues. Now, the Red Bull is not only rapid, but their tyre deck is also probably the best on the grid, so they can get away with going longer on the soft tyres, but nonetheless, that was quite something. And there were a few moments of interest in the race. There was a great moment when Alonso and Russell had a bit of a battle. Alonso got through on that particular occasion. Piastri retired on lap 10 or something. It was absolutely tragic for poor Piastri, man. He comes into the pits, some sort of issue. His car wouldn't restart. He has to retire. And Norris had a catalogue of errors as well, or issues with his car. When he was coming into the pits, he had to top up with air on the car and stuff. He actually had good pace though, and despite being a lap down on Sainz and Hamilton, was able to keep up with them for a few laps before having to pit again. Ocon, they had the worst race of the day. He eventually retired, I believe, after pitting 5 times in the first. Well, I think he had to take 20 seconds of penalties within the first 29 laps of the race or something, because he infringed on his start procedure. You guys can see he went slightly over the yellow line, so he had to take a 5-second stop and go penalty for that. He also got front wing damage there to repair that. They did it wrong, giving him another 10 seconds. Then when he came into the pits to serve that one, he sped in the pit lane, got another 5 seconds. Absolute disaster for Ocon. But on the other side of things, Gasly had a great race in the Alpine. And Red Bull again just straight up didn't miss in the strategy department. I mean, the soft, hard seemed to be the way to go. Had way more in the tank than anyone else. And then we got a fantastic Alonso versus Hamilton battle. Obviously, we've been hoping for this for decades, honestly, at this point. Not just even so far this season. But we got a great battle here. Alonso got through. Hamilton went for the switchback, got the place back on him. Then they battled for a few more laps. Alonso eventually sent one into turn 10. Hamilton tried to get it back, couldn't quite make the move happen. And so Alonso was away and gone at that point. And the Aston Martin might not be quicker in terms of qualifying pace than the Mercedes, but it's certainly quicker in the race. And that is the thing for Mercedes. Last year, they were closer in the race than they were in qualifying. This year, their quali is similar to last year, but their race pace compared to Red Bull is way worse, which is, maybe just Red Bull are way better better, right? Maybe that's the solution here. And in fairness, just when the race was looking very boring, Perez had already got through on Leclerc at this point, and it was going to be Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, and potentially Alonso could make a charge through to P5 potentially, or P4, and well, he actually got even one better than that because Leclerc's car decided to give up, and going round turn 11, turn 12, you could just hear that his car basically just gave up and his power completely cut out. Like there was no, it wasn't a gearbox thing, his engine just stopped and he just had to roll to a stop and they had to push him away under a virtual safety car. So I mean, look, obviously last season Ferrari started out so strong. Verstappen and Perez both DNF'd race 1, Verstappen again DNF'd race 3, and Leclerc was killing it over the first few races before it was really race 5 where the issues started to arrive for Ferrari. It was looking so good for them up to that point. This time, despite all the work in the off-season on supposedly upping the reliability, we know even from a video I did back in February that, you know, there were some rumours in early February that it hadn't all gone to plan for Ferrari and they were still concerned about some element of the power unit. But yeah, the car blows up, the engine stops, just completely fails. He has to, I mean, honestly, I feel bad for Leclerc, but I think honestly, his reaction here wasn't as gutting as it was, because last season when he had the issues, like in Monaco and elsewhere, even with strategy, he was super frustrated because he felt like he was in a championship fight. I don't know whether Leclerc's almost lack of reaction here indicates that he feels like this fight is already over, because, like, okay, he was annoyed on the radio, but he knew here that he was just fighting for third, and maybe they can close the gap over time, but it's not looking good at all. It does make you think back, right, to Günther Steiner's comments in December about the new, you know, the bomb Ferrari engine that they're going to get in their car, and the very first race Leclerc's car explodes. Leclerc was driving a great race, right, given the pace discrepancy between the Ferrari and the tyre deck compared to the Red Bull. He was driving very well, but yeah, the engine blows up, and that is it. It wasn't like an explosion like we saw with Sainz back in Austria before, but it was just the engine just shut off, and you know, it was unclear, was it hydraulic, was it something else? And Charles is like, look, the power went off, too bad, because we were there, could have been P3, probably would have been P3. Red Bull, of course, way too strong, and Ferrari, with a phenomenal, you know, genius diagnosis here, say we seem to have lost the engine on Charles' car. So whether that's lost as in the engine is dead and can't be repaired, because I mean, look, if that's the case, their season is legitimately already over, right? Because they're already planning to use 4, and that to have lost 1 in the very first race, it was the one thing we mentioned in the off-season Ferrari have to solve. They've got to get on top of reliability, because that's what cost them the championship this year. In the very first chance of asking, 40 laps into the race, it's done, even with the other precautionary changes they made to Leclerc's car. And yeah, Ferrari then go on to confirm Leclerc retired due to an engine problem. So I mean, man, like all this hard work for Ferrari, and it comes crashing down at the very first time of asking. The good thing, at least for the fans, is that there is some interest on track, and that comes in the form of Fernando Alonso. So Leclerc was out, and Alonso smelt his chance to potentially pick up a podium place. Sainz and Alonso and Hamilton were battling, and Norris, even here in the background, was trying his best to get in position, but Alonso made a phenomenal move on Hamilton earlier, and then did it back, a pretty similar move again on Sainz to take third place. Sainz could not battle back at all, and Sainz lost about 6, 7, 8 seconds over the next 11 laps to Alonso. Like, the race pace discrepancy between the Aston Martin and the other cars on the grid that aren't, you know, on a Red Bull was just phenomenal. And once, I mean, Alonso had way more grip than all the cars he was overtaking here. Like, it was just obvious that Alonso was going to get the move done at some point, and he did, and that's how the race finished. So Verstappen first, Perez second, Verstappen and co, I mean, we'll look at the numbers here in a second, finished so far ahead of the competition, it was unbelievable. Great though to see Alonso happy. He was absolutely buzzing over the radio, and for good reason, saying to the team how good the car is, how great it feels to drive, and I'm sure Mercedes are looking at Alonso in their power unit car, being like, how is he pulling this off? Alonso's having a great time, we're struggling, and yeah, lots of work to do for Mercedes. I'm sure we'll discuss that in due course. And just before we discuss this comment from, well, Leclerc, just wanted to look at these timesheets, right? So Verstappen and Perez, and you know full well that once Verstappen was in the lead for a few laps, that engine was turned down to the lowest possible level, right? Verstappen was big chilling out front. I don't even think he had to even concentrate on the race, to be honest. I'm sure he was chilling, watching the big screens, because like, I can't imagine how much pace Verstappen has in reserve if necessary. Like, he was pulling out like basically a second a lap he was pulling out at the start of the race when he was trying to build a gap. Then once he built enough of a gap, he chilled out. Perez was pretty much on the same pace as Verstappen in the final stint. But if Max really pushed to it, man, I wonder how much pace is in that car, because it's got to be unbelievable compared to the field. Alonso finished 38 seconds behind Verstappen. Sainz was 48 seconds behind. Hamilton and the lead Mercedes 51 seconds behind. So 57 laps, 51 seconds behind for Mercedes. Like, no, that's almost a second a lap, right? So, I mean, that is as scary as it gets, I think, for the way this season is going to go. And that's the commentary from Charles Leclerc here, right? Because Ferrari, is their season over at this point? Okay, it's not over in terms of what they're challenging for, but last year it took maybe 12, 13 races for us to think, all right, this season's done. Verstappen's the champion. Congratulations, Red Bull. This season, it's like, you know, we're at race 1 here, and Ferrari don't have a car to be competitive in terms of race pace anyway. They don't have the reliability as they've shown today. Aston Martin are great, but they're not going to be there. Mercedes are lacking like 8/10 a lap in race pace. Like, they're not going to catch that up, arguably never this season at least. They might get close, but they're not going to catch up that distance. As I say, Verstappen's got more in the tank, I think. So this is the thing, right, even as Charles says, and everyone even admitted before the race, Hamilton, Leclerc and others were like, yeah, we're not matching the Red Bull today. They're just way too good. And as Charles says, we're even 1 second per lap behind sometimes. The first few laps, like Verstappen was pulling a second a lap. Like, it was outrageous. He would come round and be ahead by 2 seconds. He'd come around the next time, be ahead by 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds. And then he thought, all right, I'll back off now. I'll give Leclerc a glimmer of hope, which of course never arrived because Ferrari snatched it away as they usually do. But yeah, as even Charles says, the Red Bull are in a different category, almost like they're in a Formula 0.5 and the rest of the grid is Formula 1. And, you know, so crazy stuff, honestly. Just wanted to look then. I mean, I actually didn't really look fully down the rest of the list here, but great drives, I thought, from Bottas. He had a great start to the race. Stroll as well deserves a lot of credit to even get up to P6 after the, you know, what he's been through the last couple of weeks. Russell had a bit of a tricky race and didn't really have the pace in the final stint. He's P7. Gasly, phenomenal recovery from Gasly up to P9. Of course, Alonso got driver of the day. And the Williams, they actually look pretty good today. I was quite impressed by the Williams. It looked like a pretty, okay, the car doesn't look phenomenal, but it looks pretty stable. And Albon did a great job. Sargent wasn't too far behind. Yuki Tsunoda just missed out on the points. Guanyu took a fastest lap point away from Gasly actually towards the end as well. Then Magnussen, Hulkenberg, De Vries here 14th. And then, yeah, Lando would have been much higher, I think, without all those issues they had. And yeah, so disaster class first race for McLaren and also for Ferrari. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.